Single father sees Maid teaching piano to his son and falls deeply in love. The late August sun cast long shadows across the pristine suburban streets of Winchester, Massachusetts, as Naomi Ellis stood before the two-story colonial house. Her resume clutched perhaps a bit too tightly in her hands. The morning air held that peculiar mix of summer's last breath and autumn's first whisper, matching the transition she hoped this interview would bring to her life. At 30, Naomi had learned to carry herself with quiet dignity. Her brown dark skin glowed in the morning light, and she had styled her natural curls in a neat afro puff that spoke of both professionalism and pride. She wore a comfortable yet presentable navy blue dress with subtle geometric patterns, an outfit that said she was ready for both work and whatever the day might bring. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed inside, followed by quick, pattering footsteps that definitely didn't belong to an adult. The door swung open to reveal a small boy with tousled blonde hair and curious blue-green eyes, wearing dinosaur-printed pajamas and mismatched socks. "Hello," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Are you the new house helper?" Before Naomi could answer, a deep voice called from inside. "Oliver!" What did we say about opening the door without checking who it is first? The owner of the voice appeared behind the boy, tall, athletic, with light brown hair touched by silver at the temples. Harry Callahan's grey-blue eyes met Naomi's, and for a moment something flickered in them, surprise perhaps, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to find on his doorstep. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone softening. "You must be Ms. Ellis. Please, come in." Naomi stepped into a home that spoke volumes about its occupants. The entrance hall was immaculate but lived in, with a row of perfectly aligned shoes by the door, large and small pairs intermixed, and a child's drawing proudly displayed in a simple frame. The house smelled of coffee and something else. Was that antiseptic? "Dad's a neat freak," Oliver stage whispered, earning a gentle headshake from his father. "Oliver, why don't you go finish your breakfast while I talk to Ms. Ellis?" Harry suggested, though his tone made it clear it wasn't really a suggestion. "But I want to help interview her," Oliver protested, bouncing on his toes. "I have important questions." Harry's expression softened, the kind of melting that seemed to happen only around his son. "Tell you what, you can ask one question now, and if Ms. Ellis stays for a proper conversation, you can ask another one later. Deal?" Oliver's face scrunched in concentration, clearly weighing this monumental decision. Finally, he turned to Naomi, his expression serious. "Do you know any good stories? The kind with different voices for different characters?" Naomi felt her tension ease slightly. "Well," she said, matching his seriousness, "I do know quite a few, and I've been told I do a pretty good dragon voice." Oliver's eyes widened. "A dragon voice?" He turned to his father. "Dad, can we keep her?" "Oliver," Harry warned, but Naomi caught the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth. "Breakfast. Now, please." Once Oliver had reluctantly trudged toward what Naomi assumed was the kitchen, Harry gestured toward a sitting room to the left. "Please, have a seat. Would you like some coffee?" "Yes, thank you," Naomi replied, following him into a room that continued the theme of ordered chaos. Medical journals stacked neatly on a coffee table, a child's toy truck parked precisely parallel to them. As Harry disappeared to get the coffee, Naomi's eyes were drawn to something she hadn't expected to see, a beautiful upright piano in the corner of the room. It wasn't new, but it had been well maintained, its wood gleaming softly in the morning light. Her fingers itched with muscle memory, but she clasped them firmly in her lap. Harry returned with 2 mugs, handling them with the precision of someone used to careful movements. "I apologize for Oliver's enthusiasm. He can be direct." "Please, don't apologize," Naomi said, accepting the coffee. "His honesty is refreshing." Harry settled into an armchair across from her, his posture straight but not stiff. "Your references are excellent," he began, "but I want to be clear about what this position entails. I'm a sports physical therapist, which means my schedule can be unpredictable. Oliver's mother," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "isn't in the picture. We need someone who can be flexible, who understands that this isn't just about keeping the house in order, but about creating stability." Naomi nodded, noting how he didn't elaborate on Oliver's mother, respecting whatever privacy lay there. "I understand," Stability isn't just about clean floors and folded laundry. It's about consistency, reliability, being there. Something in Harry's expression shifted, a recognition passing between them. "Exactly," he said softly. From the kitchen came the clatter of what was probably a spoon hitting the floor, followed by Oliver's voice. "I meant to do that." Harry closed his eyes briefly, and Naomi couldn't help but smile. When he opened them again, he caught her expression, and for a moment shared it. "There's something else you should know," he said, his tone shifting to something more professional. "The salary we discussed over the phone, I'm prepared to offer more. The position would include some afternoons with Oliver after school, at least until I get home. He's a good kid, but he's sensitive. He needs someone who understands that." Naomi took a sip of her coffee, using the moment to gather her thoughts. Through the doorway, she could see Oliver in the kitchen, carefully picking up the dropped spoon and placing it in the sink, then getting a clean one from a drawer. He moved with the deliberate care of someone trying very hard to do things right. "Mr. Callahan," she began. "Harry, please." "Harry," she corrected herself. "I appreciate the offer, but before we discuss salary, I'd like to be clear about something too." She set her coffee down, meeting his gaze directly. "I don't just want a job. I want to be somewhere I can make a difference. Somewhere I can—" She searched for the right words. "Somewhere I can belong, even if just for the hours I'm here." The morning light caught the silver in Harry's hair as he leaned forward slightly. "And what makes you think that might be here?" Naomi smiled, gentle but firm. "Because in the 10 minutes I've been in your home, I've seen more honest caring than in some places I've worked for months. And because your son asked me about story voices before asking about my qualifications, that tells me everything I need to know about what matters in this house." From the kitchen came the sound of Oliver humming, a made-up tune that meandered, but somehow stayed just this side of melodic. Harry's expression softened again, and Naomi knew he was listening to it too. "When can you start?" he asked quietly. The morning sun had risen fully now, streaming through the windows and catching dust motes in its beams. In the kitchen, Oliver continued his improvised song, and in that moment, Naomi felt something she hadn't expected to feel during a job interview: hope. "Tomorrow," she said, "if that works for you." Harry nodded, and as they stood to shake hands, Naomi caught sight of the piano again. This time, she allowed herself to really look at it, its elegant lines, its quiet presence in the corner, like a guardian waiting patiently to be remembered. "Do you play?" Harry asked, following her gaze. "Yes," she answered simply, not elaborating on the years of lessons, the competitions, the joy she'd found in teaching others. There would be time for that later, perhaps. "It was my wife's," Harry said, and then fell silent, as if surprised by his own admission. Before either of them could say more, Oliver's voice rang out from the kitchen. "Can I ask my second question now?" And just like that, the moment shifted, the heavy weight of the past giving way to the lighter presence of the present. Harry called back an affirmative, and Oliver came bounding in, still carrying his clean spoon. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, with all the gravity a 6-year-old could muster, "do you know how to make chocolate chip cookies? Because Dad tries, but they always come out flat like pancakes." "Cookie pancakes." "Oliver?" Harry protested, but Naomi was already laughing, the sound warm and genuine. "As a matter of fact," she said, "I do, and I have a secret ingredient that makes them extra special." "What is it?" Oliver gasped. Naomi winked. "Love, of course. And maybe a little bit of cinnamon." Looking up, she caught Harry watching them, his expression unreadable but somehow softer than before. In that moment, something settled into place, not with the dramatic flair of a lock clicking shut, but with the gentle certainty of a puzzle piece finding its home. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own rhythms and rules to learn. But for now, in this sun-filled room with its waiting piano and its honest questions, Naomi Ellis felt the first notes of a new song beginning to play. Naomi's first week at the Callahan house settled into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Each morning, she arrived just as Harry was finishing his coffee, watching him transform from a quietly rumpled father into the polished professional who helped athletes recover from their injuries. Oliver, still in his perpetual state of dinosaur-printed pajamas, would wave goodbye from the window, nose pressed against the glass until his father's car disappeared around the corner. It was during these morning transitions that Naomi began to notice the little things. How Harry always left Oliver's lunch packed with a small note tucked inside, how he straightened the family photos in the hallway with an almost unconscious gesture, how his eyes lingered just a moment longer than necessary when she arrived each morning. This particular Wednesday started like any other, but autumn had crept closer overnight, bringing with it a chill that made the house feel more intimate somehow. Naomi had just finished loading the breakfast dishes into the dishwasher when Oliver appeared at her elbow, clutching his ever-present collection of treasure, bits of paper, colored stones, and what looked like a small music box. "Miss Nomi," he said, using the nickname he'd bestowed upon her on day 3, "can we play a game while I wait for school?" She checked the clock. They had 30 minutes before the bus would arrive. "What kind of game did you have in mind?" Oliver's face lit up. "I invented one. It's called Find the Music. You have to find things that make pretty sounds in the house." He demonstrated by tapping his spoon against a glass, producing a clear, ringing note. Naomi smiled, remembering similar games from her own childhood. "That sounds wonderful. Should we make some rules?" "Yes." Oliver bounced on his toes. "Rule 1, no breaking anything. Rule 2, the prettier the sound, the more points you get. Rule 3, he scrunched up his face in thought, you have to dance if you find something really good. They began their exploration, Oliver leading the way with the serious determination of a symphony conductor. They discovered that the radiator cover made a gentle percussion sound when tapped lightly, that the wind chimes on the back porch played a different song depending on how you arranged them, that the old hardwood floors had spots that creaked in almost musical ways. 10 points for the wind chimes, Oliver declared, and 15 for the way you made them sing different songs. Dad never showed me that before. Naomi felt a warmth spread through her chest at his enthusiasm. "Music is everywhere if you know how to listen for it," she said, remembering her first piano teacher's words. Oliver nodded sagely, as if she'd imparted great wisdom. Then his eyes widened. "Oh, we forgot the most musical thing in the whole house." Before she could respond, he was pulling her toward the living room, toward the piano that sat in its corner like a silent guardian. Naomi had been careful not to approach it all week, unsure of the boundaries in this still new arrangement. "Dad said it was Mom's," Oliver said matter-of-factly, running his small hand along its polished surface, "but nobody ever plays it anymore. It's lonely." Naomi felt her heart catch. "Lonely things should have friends," she said softly. Oliver looked up at her with those 2 wise eyes. "Do you know how to be its friend?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that a 6-year-old couldn't fully grasp, but somehow understood anyway. Naomi sat down at the bench, and after a moment's hesitation, Oliver climbed up beside her. "May I?" she asked, though she wasn't sure if she was asking Oliver or the piano itself. He nodded enthusiastically, and Naomi placed her fingers on the keys. The piano was perfectly in tune. Harry must have maintained it even if no one played it. She began with something simple, a melody her mother had taught her when she was barely older than Oliver. The notes floated up like bubbles, clear and bright in the morning air. Oliver sat transfixed, his breath coming in little gasps of wonder. When she finished, he turned to her with eyes that sparkled with possibility. "Can you teach me, please? I promise I'll practice every day and wash my hands first, and never slam the lid." Naomi hesitated. This wasn't part of her job description, and she wasn't sure how Harry would feel about it. "We should ask your father first," she said gently. "Ask me what?" They both turned to find Harry standing in the doorway, his tie slightly askew, as if he'd forgotten something, and rushed back. The look on his face was unreadable. Surprise, certainly, but something else too, something that made Naomi's fingers slip from the keys as if burned. "Dad!" Oliver leaped from the bench. "Miss Nomi can play the piano. Like, really play it. And I want her to teach me. Please, please, please. She made it not lonely anymore." Harry's expression shifted, softened. He looked at Naomi with a question in his eyes. "I'm sorry," she began. "I shouldn't have." "No," Harry interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "Don't apologize. I've been—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been wondering when someone would wake it up again." Oliver tugged at his father's sleeve. "So can she teach me, please?" Harry knelt down to his son's level, a gesture Naomi had seen him do often, always making sure Oliver felt heard, seen. Would you practice? Really practice, not just play around? Every day, Oliver promised. I'll even eat my vegetables. A smile tugged at the corner of Harry's mouth. I don't think those two things are related, buddy. He glanced up at Naomi. Would you be willing? It would be extra, of course, on top of your regular, no extra payment, Naomi said firmly. Music shouldn't be about money. If Oliver wants to learn, really wants to learn, then it would be my pleasure. Something passed between them then, a recognition of shared values that needed no words. Harry nodded slowly. Okay then. Oliver's whoop of joy echoed through the house, and he immediately began plotting out his future as a musical genius. I'm going to learn all the songs in the world, and then I'll make up new ones, and then... He stopped suddenly, looking at the clock. Oh no. The bus! The next few minutes were a whirlwind of backpack checking and shoe tying, but just before they headed out to the bus stop, Oliver ran back to the piano and patted it gently. Don't worry, he whispered, loud enough for both adults to hear. You're not lonely anymore. After Oliver was safely on his way to school, Harry lingered in the doorway, his tie still crooked. Naomi found herself fighting the urge to straighten it. I never learned to play, he said finally. My wife and she tried to teach me once, but I was too focused on getting it perfect right away. Couldn't just let myself learn slowly, make mistakes. He smiled ruefully. Oliver's different. He understands that beauty doesn't have to be perfect. Naomi thought about the way Oliver collected his treasures, each one precious, not for what it was, but for what he saw in it. He has a beautiful soul, she said simply. Harry's eyes met hers, held for a moment too long. Yes, he said softly, he does. Then clearing his throat, I should get to work. I have a patient at 9. Your tie, Naomi said before she could stop herself. Harry's hand went to his neck, fumbling slightly. Without thinking, Naomi stepped forward and straightened the silk with careful fingers. She could smell his aftershave, something clean and subtle that reminded her of early morning air. Twice there, she said, stepping back quickly. All professional now, thank you, he murmured, and she wasn't sure if he meant for the tie or for something else entirely. After he left, Naomi stood in the quiet house, letting the morning's events settle around her like dust motes in sunlight. She turned to look at the piano, its keys still warm from her touch. Hello, old friend, she whispered, running a finger along its smooth surface. Shall we make some music together? And in the empty house, with autumn light streaming through the windows and the ghost of Harry's aftershave still lingering in the air, Naomi began to play, not for anyone else this time, but for herself, for the joy of it, for the way the music filled the spaces between heartbeats. She didn't notice the way the plants seemed to lean toward the sound, or how the house itself seemed to exhale, as if it too had been holding its breath, waiting for someone to remember that music wasn't just about the notes. It was about the spaces between them, the pauses, the moments when one chord hung suspended before resolving into the next. Just like life itself, she thought, her fingers finding the keys without conscious thought. Sometimes the most beautiful progressions came from the moments of tension, the waiting, the gentle unfolding of one note into another, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered if Harry had really forgotten something that morning, or if he'd come back for another reason entirely. The weeks melted into each other like warming honey, and October painted Winchester in shades of amber and gold. Naomi had settled into a routine that felt as natural as breathing. Morning preparations, seeing Harry off to work, getting Oliver to school, then the quiet dance of maintaining the house until afternoon piano lessons began. Today, however, was different. The morning air held an electric charge as Oliver practically vibrated with excitement at the breakfast table. It's my turn to bring treats for class today, he announced for the third time, his spoon creating abstract art with milk droplets on the table. And what are we making? Naomi asked, already knowing the answer but enjoying his enthusiasm. The special cookies, Oliver's eyes sparkled. With the secret cinnamon? Harry looked up from his phone where he'd been checking his patient schedule. Those ones you've been talking about non-stop for 2 weeks. His eyes met Naomi's over his coffee cup, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They're the best cookies in the universe, Dad. Even better than Grammy's. But don't tell her I said that. Oliver leaned in conspiratorially. So Miss Naomi says the secret is to bake them with love. Is that so? Harry's voice was light, but something in his expression shifted when he looked at Naomi again, something warm and wondering. Naomi busied herself wiping down the counter, hoping her dark skin hid the warmth she felt rising in her cheeks. Well, that and proper measuring. Speaking of which, we should get started if we want them ready for school. Oliver bounded from his chair, nearly knocking over his milk. Harry's hand shot out automatically to steady the glass, a gesture so practiced it seemed like muscle memory. Careful, buddy. Why don't you go wash up while Miss Naomi gets everything ready? As Oliver thundered up the stairs, Harry stood and brought his coffee cup to the sink. He stood closer to Naomi than strictly necessary, their arms almost touching as she rinsed dishes. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For making this house feel like—" He paused, searching for words. "Like music again." Before Naomi could respond, Oliver returned with remarkably clean hands and a determined expression, ready for Operation Cookie Magic. The next hour was a whirlwind of measuring, mixing, and managing Oliver's enthusiastic help. Harry lingered longer than usual, watching them from the doorway as Naomi showed Oliver how to level flour with a knife, how to crack eggs without getting shells in the batter, how to tell when the butter was perfectly softened. "Dad, you're going to be late," Oliver said finally. Chocolate smeared adorably on his chin. Harry started, checking his watch. "Right, yes, I should." He gestured vaguely toward the door, but didn't move. "We've got this under control," Naomi assured him, fighting a smile at his obvious reluctance to leave the domestic scene before him. Although, she hesitated, then pressed on, "If you'd like to try one fresh from the oven, maybe you could stop by during your lunch break." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than they should have been for a simple cookie invitation. Harry's eyes softened. "I'd like that." After he left, Naomi and Oliver fell into their baking rhythm. She showed him how to roll the dough into perfect spheres, like tiny planets, Miss Naomi, and explained why they needed to space them apart on the baking sheet. "Because they need room to grow," Oliver said wisely, "like people do." Naomi paused in her cookie spacing. "That's very insightful, Oliver. How did you get so smart?" He shrugged, licking chocolate from his fingers despite her gentle reminder about hand-washing. "Dad says Mom was really smart, and he's smart too, even though he forgets to match his socks sometimes." He looked up at her with those clear blue-green eyes. "You're smart too, Miss Naomi. You know about music and cookies, and how to make the house feel right." "Make the house feel right," Oliver nodded, suddenly serious. "Before you came, the house was too quiet. Dad tried to make it nice, but he didn't know how to make it sing. Now it sings all the time, even when you're not playing the piano." Naomi felt her throat tighten. She busied herself with sliding the first batch of cookies into the oven, using the moment to compose herself. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "houses are like instruments. They need someone to help them find their music again, like how you helped the piano not be lonely anymore." Exactly like that. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the kitchen filling with the warm, sweet smell of baking cookies. Oliver arranged the cooling ones on a wire rack with surgical precision, making sure each one had exactly the same amount of space around it, so much his father's son in some ways. "Miss Naomi," his voice was quieter now, almost hesitant, "do you think Dad is lonely sometimes?" The question caught her off guard, making her nearly drop the spatula she was holding. "What makes you think that?" Oliver concentrated on arranging another cookie before answering. "Sometimes, and when he thinks I'm sleeping, he sits at the piano and just looks at it. He doesn't play. He says he never learned how. But he looks at it like it knows something he wants to remember." He paused, then added, "But he doesn't do that as much anymore. Now he listens to you play instead." Naomi's heart did a complicated flutter in her chest. She'd noticed Harry lingering in the doorway during Oliver's lessons, but she'd assumed he was just monitoring his son's progress. The idea that he might have been listening to her, the timer's cheerful ding, saved her from having to respond. As she pulled out the last batch of perfectly golden brown cookies, she heard the front door open. "Dad," Oliver called out, "you're just in time. They're still warm." Harry appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tie loosened and his hair slightly ruffled as if he'd been running his hands through it. The sight made something in Naomi's chest tighten. "I can smell them from outside," he said, smiling. "The whole neighborhood probably can." "Try one," Oliver insisted. pushing a cookie into his father's hand. "Miss Nomi says this is when they're the most magical." Harry took a bite, and his eyes widened slightly. "These are—" He took another bite, looking at Naomi with newfound respect. "These are incredible. The secret ingredient," Oliver stage whispered. "Ah, yes, the love and cinnamon," Harry said, his eyes not leaving Naomi's face, "although I'm beginning to think there might be actual magic involved." Naomi felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the oven's residual heat. "Just simple chemistry," she said softly. "The right ingredients, the right temperature, the right moment." Their eyes held for a long moment until Oliver's voice broke the spell. "Dad, you've got chocolate on your chin." Harry quickly wiped his face, looking embarrassed. "I should get back to the clinic. Mrs. Henderson's knee won't rehabilitate itself." He hesitated, then added, "Save me another one for later." "We'll make sure of it," Naomi promised. After he left, Oliver helped her pack the cookies carefully into containers for his class. As they worked, he hummed the piece they'd been practicing on the piano, his small fingers tapping out the rhythm on the counter. "Miss Nomi," he said eventually, "I think Dad likes your cookies almost as much as I do." Naomi smiled, remembering the way Harry's eyes had crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I think he might," she agreed. "And I think," Oliver continued, with the devastating insight of children, "that he likes how you make the house sing, too." Naomi felt her breath catch. Before she could respond, Oliver was already moving on, chattering about how impressed his classmates would be with their baking creation, but his words lingered in the air like the sweet smell of cinnamon and chocolate, like the phantom notes of a piano in an empty room, like the memory of Harry's eyes meeting hers over a warm cookie on an ordinary Tuesday that somehow felt anything but ordinary. Later, after Oliver had left for school with his precious cargo of cookies, Naomi stood in the quiet kitchen. She wiped down the counters, put away the ingredients, restored everything to its proper place, but she left one cookie out on a small plate, wrapped carefully in wax paper, waiting for Harry's return. Because sometimes she was learning. The most important songs were the ones played in the quiet moments, in the small gestures, in the spaces between the notes, where hope and possibility lived. And maybe, just maybe, this house was teaching her how to hear those songs again too. The first real cold snap of autumn caught Winchester by surprise, bringing with it slate-grey skies and the kind of rain that seemed to seep into bones. Naomi arrived at the Callahan house earlier than usual that Monday morning, shaking droplets from her umbrella as she let herself in with her key. The house was oddly quiet. No sounds of Oliver's morning cartoons or Harry's coffee machine. "Hello?" she called out softly, hanging her coat on the rack by the door. The silence that answered held an unfamiliar tension. She found them in Oliver's room. Harry sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on his son's forehead, while Oliver curled into himself, face flushed with fever. The sight made Naomi's heart clench. "Miss Nomi," Oliver croaked, attempting a smile that looked more like a grimace. "I don't feel very musical today." Harry looked up, and Naomi could see the worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "His temperature's 101.2, he said quietly. "It spiked overnight." "Did you call Dr. Martinez?" Naomi moved to the bed, her hand automatically reaching for Oliver's curls, damp with sweat. "Yes, she says it's probably the flu that's been going around, but—" Harry ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in worried spikes. "I have 3 patients this morning who've been waiting weeks for their appointments. I can't reschedule them, but I don't want to leave him alone." "I'm right here," Naomi said simply. "I'll stay with him." The relief that flooded Harry's face made her chest tight. "Are you sure he can be a handful when he's sick?" "I'm not a handful," Oliver protested weakly. "I'm just floppy." Despite his worry, Harry smiled. "Floppy is a pretty accurate description, buddy." He turned to Naomi, his voice lower. "He'll need his medicine in 2 hours. The instructions are on the kitchen counter. And he should try to drink something. There's ginger ale in the fridge." "Harry," Naomi touched his arm gently, "we'll be fine. Go help your patients." He looked down at where her hand rested on his sleeve, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Oliver coughed, breaking the spell. "Right." Harry straightened, professional mode sliding back into place. I'll try to come home for lunch to check on him. Call me if anything changes." After he left, Naomi turned her attention to her patient. "Well, Mr. Floppy, shall we make the best of this rainy day?" Oliver managed a weak giggle that turned into a cough. "Can you tell me a story? One with a dragon?" "Even better," Naomi said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "How about a story about a dragon who caught a cold?" She wove a tale about a dragon whose sneezes came out as musical notes instead of fire, making flowers grow wherever the notes landed. Oliver drifted in and out of sleep as she spoke, but each time he opened his eyes, she was there, ready with a sip of ginger ale or a cool cloth for his forehead. Around mid-morning, while Oliver dozed, Naomi heard the piano bench creak downstairs. She froze, listening. The house was still except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. Then it came again, a single, hesitant note, played so softly it was almost a whisper. Making sure Oliver was sleeping peacefully, she crept downstairs. Harry stood by the piano, one finger still resting on a key, his tie askew and his hair damp from the rain. "I thought you had patience," she said softly. He started, turning to face her. "I had a cancellation. Came to check on Oliver, but he's sleeping. And you found yourself here instead." Harry looked back at the piano, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I used to watch her play," he said quietly. "She'd sit here for hours, making the whole world disappear except for the music. I never understood how she could lose herself in it like that. But lately," he trailed off, looking at Naomi with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lately? Lately I've been watching you play, the way you close your eyes sometimes, the way your hands move like they're dancing, and I think I'm starting to understand what she meant about music being a different kind of language." Naomi moved closer, drawn by something in his voice. "Would you like to learn?" "What?" "To play, to speak that language." Harry's laugh was soft, self-deprecating. "I tried once. Remember? If I'm too—" He gestured vaguely with his hands. "Perfectionist?" Naomi supplied, smiling. She sat down at the bench and patted the space beside her. "Come here." After a moment's hesitation, he joined her. The bench was narrow enough that their shoulders touched, and Naomi could smell the rain on his coat, mixed with that subtle aftershave she'd grown to associate with early mornings and quiet moments. "Give me your hands," she said. When he hesitated, she added gently, "Trust me." He placed his hands in hers, and she had to suppress a small shiver at the contact. His hands were larger than hers, the fingers long and strong from years of physical therapy work. She positioned them on the keys, letting her own hands rest lightly on top of his. "Music isn't about being perfect," she said softly. "It's about feeling, about letting go." "Close your eyes." Naomi closed them. He did, and she felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Slowly, she pressed down on his fingers, guiding them through a simple melody, the same one she'd been teaching Oliver. "Listen," she murmured. "Don't think about the notes. Just feel how they flow into each other." They played like that for several minutes, his hands warming under hers, the melody growing more confident with each repetition. When she finally lifted her hands away, his eyes opened, looking at her with something like wonder. "I did it," he whispered. "You did." She was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, how their knees touched beneath the piano, how his eyes seemed to hold all the colors of the rainy sky outside. A small cough from the doorway made them both jump. Oliver stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, wrapped in his blanket like a tiny emperor. "Dad?" His voice was rough, but his eyes were bright. "Were you playing the piano?" Harry cleared his throat, shifting slightly away from Naomi on the bench. "Miss Nomi was teaching me, like she teaches you." Oliver's face lit up despite his fever. "Does this mean we can both learn? And then we can all play together?" The hope in his voice made something in Naomi's chest expand like a balloon. She looked at Harry, who was watching his son with an expression that held equal parts love and possibility. "Maybe," Harry said softly, "but right now, you should be in bed, young man." "Will you both come up?" Oliver asked. "Dad can practice his reading and Miss Nomi can tell more dragon stories." Harry looked at Naomi, a question in his eyes. She nodded, smiling. "I think that sounds perfect." They spent the rest of the morning in Oliver's room, taking turns reading stories and keeping him entertained. Harry had to leave eventually for his afternoon patients, but not before Oliver made him promise to practice his piano homework. "Same time tomorrow," Harry asked from the doorway, looking at Naomi with a warmth that had nothing to do with Oliver's fever. Same time, she agreed. After he left, Oliver tugged at her sleeve. "That's Miss Naomi." "Yes, sweetheart. I like how you teach Dad. He looks less scared of the piano now." Naomi smoothed his hair back from his forehead, noting with relief that his temperature seemed to be dropping. Sometimes people just need someone to show them it's okay to try new things. "Like how you showed me it's okay to make mistakes when I'm learning a new song." Exactly like that. Oliver was quiet for a moment, his eyes growing heavy with approaching sleep. "Miss Naomi. I think Dad likes learning from you even more than I do." Before Naomi could respond, his breathing had evened out into sleep. She sat there for a long time, watching his peaceful face, thinking about the weight of Harry's hands under hers, about the way music could say things that words couldn't, about how sometimes the most beautiful melodies were the ones you never expected to play. Outside, the rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows, but inside the house felt warmer somehow, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting to hear what the next note would be. November arrived with a burst of crisp air and swirling leaves, transforming Winchester into a painting of russet and gold. The change in seasons brought with it a shift in the Callahan household's rhythm. Earlier sunsets meant longer evenings inside, and the cooling weather drew them all closer to the warmth of home and each other. Naomi stood at the kitchen window, absently drying dishes while watching Oliver chase leaves in the backyard. His laughter floated through the glass, a bright counterpoint to the melancholy beauty of late autumn. She smiled, remembering how just last week he'd proudly played his first complete song on the piano, his small fingers moving with growing confidence over the keys. The sound of the front door opening pulled her from her reverie. Harry wasn't due home for hours. He had a full schedule of patients on Thursdays, but there he was, standing in the kitchen doorway, his face drawn with an emotion she couldn't quite read. "Harry, is everything all right?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of internal struggle. "The hospital called. They have an emergency case, a professional athlete with a complex injury. They need me to fly to Chicago tonight for a consultation." "Tonight?" Naomi set down the dish towel, turning to face him fully. "I know it's short notice, but this could be a career-changing opportunity." He moved to the window, watching Oliver play. "I've never left him overnight before, not since—" The unspoken words hung in the air between them. "Not since his mother left." "How long will you be gone?" Naomi asked softly. "Just 2 nights. I'd be back Saturday evening." He turned to her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her heart ache. "I know it's asking a lot, but would you stay with Oliver?" She finished for him. "Of course." The relief that flooded his face was almost painful to watch. "I'll pay you extra for the overnight hours, and there's a guest room upstairs that's—" "Harry," she interrupted gently. "Stop. This isn't about money. Oliver and I will be fine. We'll practice piano, make dinner, and maybe build that blanket fort he's been talking about all week." Harry's shoulders relaxed slightly, but there was still tension in his jaw. "I should talk to him." "Explain." As if on cue, Oliver burst through the back door, his cheeks flushed from playing, and a handful of perfect maple leaves clutched to his chest. "Dad, you're home early. Look what I found for my collection." Harry knelt down to his son's level, accepting the leafy offerings with appropriate solemnity. "These are beautiful, buddy. But listen, I need to talk to you about something important." Oliver's expression turned serious, picking up on his father's tone. "Is it about the hospital calling?" Harry blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "I heard your phone ring during lunch at school. It played the special hospital song." Oliver shrugged, as if this level of observation was perfectly normal for a 6-year-old. "Yes, it's about that." Harry glanced up at Naomi, who gave him an encouraging nod. "They need me to go help someone who's hurt. I'll have to go away for 2 nights. Oliver was quiet for a moment, processing this information, like a superhero mission. A smile tugged at Harry's mouth. "Something like that. Miss Naomi will stay here with you while I'm gone. Would that be okay?" Oliver looked at Naomi, his blue-green eyes thoughtful. "Will we still have piano lessons?" "Of course," she assured him. "So maybe we can prepare a special performance for when your dad comes home." Oliver's face lit up. "Can we make it a surprise? Dad's never heard me play a whole song by myself." "That's a wonderful idea," Naomi said. watching Harry's expression soften with love and pride. The next hour was a whirlwind of packing and preparations. Harry moved through the house with focused efficiency, making lists and explaining routines that Naomi already knew by heart. She let him talk, understanding that this was as much about calming his own anxiety as it was about ensuring Oliver's care. His favorite pajamas are in the second drawer, next to the dinosaur socks, Naomi finished gently. Harry, breathe. We've got this. He stopped in the middle of folding a shirt, looking at her with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. I don't know what I'd do without you, he said quietly. Before she could respond, Oliver appeared in the doorway. Dad, can I help pack? Sure, buddy. Want to help me choose a tie for my meeting tomorrow? As Oliver solemnly debated the merits of different neckties, Naomi slipped downstairs to start dinner. She was halfway through preparing Oliver's favorite pasta when she heard footsteps behind her. He's watching cartoons, Harry said, leaning against the counter. His way of pretending everything's normal. Naomi stirred the sauce, adding a pinch of herbs. He's stronger than you think, and he understands more than most kids his age. I know. Sometimes I think he understands more than I do. Harry moved closer, watching her cook. Thank you, Naomi. Not just for staying, but for everything. She turned to look at him, struck by the intensity in his grey-blue eyes. You don't have to thank me. This is where I want to be. The words came out more honest than she'd intended, and for a moment the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Harry took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his hair, catching the early evening light. Naomi, Dad! Oliver's voice carried from the living room. The car is here. The moment shattered like a dropped glass. Harry stepped back, running a hand through his hair again. Right. Yes. I should go, Naomi said softly. We'll be here when you get back. The goodbye at the door was a study in contained emotion. Oliver hugged his father tightly, making him promise to call before bedtime. Harry held on perhaps a few seconds longer than necessary, pressing a kiss to his son's hair. When he turned to Naomi, there was so much unsaid in his eyes that she felt her breath catch. Take care of each other, he said finally. Always, she promised. They watched from the door as the car pulled away, Oliver waving until it disappeared around the corner. Then he turned to Naomi with determined brightness. Can we start practicing our surprise now? She smiled, recognizing his need for distraction. Let's eat dinner first. Then we can play as long as you want. The evening passed in a blur of pasta, piano practice, and preparation for bed. Oliver insisted on wearing his most grown-up pajamas. Because I'm the man of the house now, Miss Naomi. The phrase made her heart twist, remembering how young he still was, how much he tried to shoulder. After tucking him in, Naomi sat in the quiet house, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds. It felt strange being here without Harry's solid presence, without the knowledge that he was just a room away. She found herself at the piano, fingers trailing over the keys that had become so familiar. The phone rang exactly at 8, right on schedule. She could hear Oliver's excited voice upstairs, telling his father about their day, about the leaves he'd collected, about the secret surprise they were planning. When his voice grew sleepy, she took the phone. He's okay? Harry asked immediately. Perfect. Already half asleep. A pause, filled with the static of distance. And you? I'm good, she said softly. The house is quiet, but peaceful. It feels more like home when you're there, he said, so quietly she almost missed it. Then, more normally, I should let you go. Early morning tomorrow. Good luck with your consultation. Naomi. Yes. Thank you for making us whole again. The line clicked dead before she could respond, leaving her standing in the darkened living room, phone pressed to her heart, surrounded by the gentle breathing of a house that had, somehow, become her home too. The first night without Harry in the house felt strange, like a familiar song played in a different key. Naomi lay awake in the guest room, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and whispers of the house at night. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. when she heard it, the soft padding of small feet in the hallway. She was already sitting up when Oliver appeared in the doorway, clutching his treasured music box and looking smaller than usual in his rocket ship pajamas. Can't sleep? She asked softly. He shook his head, hovering uncertainly at the threshold. The house sounds different at night. Want to come sit with me for a while? Oliver nodded, crossing the room and climbing onto the bed. He settled against her side, his music box held protectively against his chest. Dad always says the house makes noise because it's singing itself to sleep. Naomi smiled, running her hand gently over his tousled hair. Your dad is very wise. He misses Mom sometimes, Oliver said suddenly, his voice small in the darkness. I can tell because he gets extra quiet and organizes things that are already organized. Naomi's heart clenched. That must be hard to watch. But he's different now. Oliver turned to look up at her, his eyes reflecting the soft glow from the nightlight in the hall. He smiles more, and sometimes he hums when he thinks no one's listening. Before Naomi could respond, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Oliver pressed closer to her side. Would you like to hear a secret about thunderstorms? She asked, feeling him nod against her arm. My grandmother used to tell me that thunder is just the clouds having a piano recital. Really? The soft rumbles are the bass notes, and the loud cracks are when they hit the high keys too hard because they're excited about the music. Oliver considered this seriously. Is that why it always rains? Because the clouds are crying happy tears about the pretty music. Exactly, Naomi smiled, remembering how her own grandmother had comforted her during storms. Would you like to help the clouds make their music? When Oliver nodded eagerly, she stood and held out her hand. Come on then. They made their way downstairs in the dark, Naomi leading them carefully through the familiar space that felt different in the nighttime shadows. The piano stood like a silent guardian in its corner, and Oliver's hand tightened in hers as another rumble of thunder shook the windows. The clouds are playing their part, Naomi said, sitting at the bench and lifting Oliver beside her. Shall we join them? She began to play softly, a gentle lullaby that wove between the thunderclaps like a dance. Oliver watched her hands move, his own small fingers twitching as if wanting to join in. Here, she guided his hands to the keys. Remember the song we're practicing for your dad? Let's play it together. They played in the dark, the piano's warm tones harmonizing with the storm outside. Oliver's dedication to learning the piece for his father gave him a focus that pushed away his fears. When his eyes started to droop, Naomi transitioned into softer, more soothing melodies. Miss Naomi? His voice was heavy with approaching sleep. Toys, yes. Do you think Dad can hear our music all the way in Chicago? Naomi's hands stilled on the keys. I think, she said carefully, that love can travel any distance, and music is just another way of sending love. Oliver nodded as if this made perfect sense, then yawned hugely. Can we sleep down here tonight, so we can keep the piano company? Instead of answering, Naomi rose and gathered blankets from the living room couch. She created a cozy nest on the floor near the piano, making sure Oliver's music box had its own special place beside his pillow. As they settled into their makeshift bed, another wave of thunder rolled overhead, but Oliver didn't flinch this time. The clouds are playing a lullaby now, he whispered, snuggling closer to Naomi. They are, she agreed, wrapping an arm around him. Close your eyes and listen. Soon Oliver's breathing evened out into sleep, but Naomi remained awake, watching shadows dance across the ceiling and thinking about the strange paths that led people to exactly where they needed to be. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. A text from Harry. Everything okay, can't sleep. She smiled in the darkness, imagining him in a hotel room, probably organizing the desk drawers to calm his mind. We're fine, she typed back. Having a piano sleepover to keep the thunder company. There was a pause before his reply came. I can picture it perfectly. Wish I was there. Naomi looked at the sleeping child beside her, at the piano standing sentinel above them, at the life she had somehow woven herself into without even realizing it. We wish you were here too, she wrote back. Another pause, longer this time. Then, I miss you both. The words glowed on her screen like a confession, making her heart skip. Before she could overthink it, she replied, We miss you too. The house doesn't sound right without you. Tell me about your evening. And so, in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, Naomi typed out their small adventures. Oliver's attempt to make his own dinner, supervised, of course, his proud mastery of a particularly tricky passage in his piano piece, the way he'd explained music theory to his stuffed animals using cookie crumbs as note markers. Harry's responses came quickly, eager for every detail, and she could feel his longing to be part of these moments reaching through the digital space between them. When Oliver stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about cloud concerts, she added that to their conversation too. "You're amazing with him," Harry wrote. "I've never seen him so confident, so himself." "He makes it easy," Naomi replied. "He has such a beautiful soul, like his teacher." The words made her breath catch. Before she could respond, another text came through. "I should try to sleep. Early meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Naomi, for everything." "Sleep well," she wrote back, then added, "because the night made her brave. We'll be here, keeping your music safe until you come home." She could almost feel him smile through his final message. Home. Yes, that's exactly what you've made it. The storm had moved on, leaving behind the gentle patter of rain and the soft breathing of a sleeping child. Naomi lay in the darkness, one hand resting protectively on Oliver's back, the other still holding her phone with Harry's words glowing on the screen. The piano rose above them like a beloved guardian, its silence full of possibility and promise. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Making breakfast, getting Oliver ready for school, maintaining their routine while missing the third part of their harmony. But for now, in this quiet moment between night and morning, Naomi allowed herself to feel the fullness of what was growing in this house. A love as natural as music, as steady as a heartbeat, as real as the keys beneath her fingers when she played. She drifted off to sleep finally, dreaming of melodies that braided together like paths finding their way home, of hands meeting on piano keys, of thunder playing duets with heartbeats. And somewhere in Chicago, in a hotel room probably now as organized as a symphony score, Harry Callahan finally slept too, carried into dreams by thoughts of his son's laughter and the way Naomi's hands moved across the keys, making their house sing again. In the morning, they would wake to find the storm had painted the world clean, leaving behind a sky as clear and full of promise as a perfect note held in still air. But that was tomorrow. For now, they slept, each dreaming their own dreams of music and family and love, while the piano kept its quiet vigil in the corner, waiting for the next song to begin. Saturday dawned bright and crisp, the kind of autumn morning that painted frost on windows and turned breath into small clouds of possibility. Naomi woke early, her mind already racing with preparations. Harry would be home today. Oliver had been up since dawn, practicing his special song with a determination that made her heart swell. Now he sat at the kitchen counter, watching her prepare French toast, Harry's favorite breakfast, with unusual intensity. "Heart, do you think it's all perfect?" he asked, fidgeting with his fork. "The song, the breakfast, everything?" Naomi flipped a piece of bread in the pan, considering her answer. "You know what your dad told you about music. It doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful." "But I want it to be special," Oliver insisted, because he was brave going away, even though it was hard. The wisdom in his words made Naomi pause. She turned from the stove to look at him properly. "Oliver, everything you do is special to your father. You know that, right?" He nodded slowly. "Like how he keeps all my drawings, even the messy ones." "Exactly like that." Their morning moved forward with nervous energy, both of them checking the clock more often than necessary. Oliver insisted on wearing his concert outfit, a blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes and his nicest khakis. He even attempted to tame his perpetually tousled hair, though it refused to cooperate. "Miss Naomi," he called from the bathroom, "can you help me? It's being rebellious." She found him frowning at his reflection, a comb clutched in his small hand. With gentle fingers, she helped him style his blonde locks into something that looked charmingly intentional rather than accidentally windswept. "There," she said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "Very handsome," his reflection smiled back at her. "Like Dad." "You're your own kind of handsome," she replied, ruffling his newly tamed hair slightly. "But yes, I see a lot of your father in you." The sound of a car door closing outside made them both freeze. Oliver's eyes widened. "He's early. Quick." Naomi straightened his collar. "Get to the piano." "I'll let him in." She watched Oliver scamper down the hallway, then took a deep breath and moved to the front door. When she opened it, Harry stood there with his travel bag, looking somehow both tired and energized. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. "Welcome home," she said softly. He stepped forward, and for a moment she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he reached out and squeezed her hand, the touch brief but full of unspoken things. "It's good to be home." Before either could say more, music floated from the living room, the opening notes of Oliver's surprise performance. Harry's eyes widened in recognition of the melody. "Is that?" Naomi nodded, tugging gently on his hand. "Come see." They entered the living room to find Oliver sitting straight-backed at the piano, his small fingers moving across the keys with careful precision. The piece was simple, a beginner's version of Beautiful Dreamer, but he played it with such focus and feeling that it took on a magic all its own. Harry stood transfixed, his hand still in Naomi's, watching his son create music from the same keys that had been silent for so long. When Oliver reached the final notes, the room held its breath for a moment before Harry moved forward. "Oliver," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. "That was—" Oliver spun around on the bench, face glowing. "Did you like it? I practiced 1,000,000 times. Well, maybe not 1,000,000, but a lot. Miss Naomi helped me count the beats and everything." Harry gathered his son into his arms, holding him close. Over Oliver's shoulder, his eyes met Naomi's, filled with a gratitude that went beyond words. "I loved it," he said. "It was the most beautiful welcome home I could have imagined. We made French toast too." Oliver wriggled out of his father's embrace. "And I only spilled a little bit of vanilla, but Miss Naomi said that's how you make the kitchen smell nice anyway." Harry laughed, the sound warming the room. "Is that so?" They moved to the kitchen, where the breakfast waited on warmed plates. Oliver chattered excitedly about their 2 days together, the thunderstorm concert, their piano sleepover, the leaf collection they'd organized by color and size. "And Miss Naomi showed me how to make hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows that look like musical notes," he added between bites. Harry raised an eyebrow at Naomi. "Musical marshmallows?" She shrugged, smiling. "It's all about presentation." As they ate, Naomi noticed the way Harry kept looking at them both, as if reassuring himself that this was real, this warm kitchen, this happy child, this moment of perfect belonging. When Oliver ran upstairs to get his latest drawings, Harry turned to her. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Not just for staying with him, but for everything. The house feels different when you're here, warmer, more alive." Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's not me, it's the music coming back." "No." Harry shook his head, his voice soft but certain. "It's you. The music is just how you let your light shine through." Their eyes met across the kitchen island, and Naomi felt the air change between them, becoming charged with possibility. Harry took a step toward her. "Dad!" Oliver's voice preceded him down the stairs. "So look what I drew while you were gone." The moment shifted but didn't break. Instead, it settled into something warmer, more certain, as they looked through Oliver's artwork together, pictures of their house with musical notes floating from the windows, of 3 figures sitting at a piano, of stars that looked suspiciously like treble clefs. Later, after Oliver had exhausted himself showing his father every minute detail of their 2 days together, he fell asleep on the couch, his head in Harry's lap. Harry stroked his son's hair gently, looking down at him with infinite tenderness. "He missed you," Naomi said softly from her spot in the armchair. "But he was so brave, like his mother," Harry said quietly, then looked up quickly as if surprised by his own words. "I'm sorry, I don't usually—" "It's okay," Naomi assured him. "She's part of who he is. That's not something that needs to be hidden." Harry was quiet for a moment, still running his fingers through Oliver's hair. "You know what's strange? When I think about her now, it's not with anger or pain anymore, it's just acceptance. She gave me Oliver, and then she gave us the piano. And now, he looked at her, his eyes soft in the afternoon light. Now the house is full of music again, but it's different. It's not about the past anymore. It's about—" He gestured to the scene around them, Oliver sleeping peacefully, the piano standing proud in its corner, the warm kitchen still smelling of vanilla and possibilities. "The future," Naomi suggested gently. "Yes," he breathed, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Exactly that." The rest of the day passed in a gentle haze of comfortable domesticity. Oliver insisted on playing his piece again after his nap, this time with Naomi accompanying him on the lower octaves. Harry watched them from his spot by the window, his expression holding something that looked remarkably like joy. As evening approached and Oliver began to droop again, worn out from excitement, Harry carried him upstairs for bed. Naomi began gathering her things, preparing to return to her own apartment for the first time in 2 days. She was at the door when Harry came back downstairs. "He wants to say good night to you," he said, "if you don't mind." "Upstairs?" Oliver was already half asleep, but he smiled when she appeared. "Miss Naomi, will you be here tomorrow?" "Of course," she promised, smoothing his hair. "Good," he mumbled, "because Dad missed your music too." "I could tell." Naomi felt Harry's presence in the doorway behind her, knew he'd heard his son's words. When she turned, their eyes met in the soft darkness of the hallway. "He's right," Harry said simply. And in those 2 words, in the way he looked at her, in the quiet of this house that had become so much more than just a workplace, Naomi heard the beginning of a new song, one that had been writing itself all along, note by careful note, in the spaces between piano keys and heartbeats. Winter came early to Winchester that year, dusting the town with snow before Thanksgiving had even arrived. The change in weather brought with it a shift in the Callahan household's rhythm. Morning routines started in darkness, and evenings drew them inside earlier, creating cocoons of warmth and music against the growing cold. Naomi noticed the change in Harry first. Small things, lingering touches when she handed him his morning coffee, the way his eyes followed her movements around the house, how he'd started coming home earlier on piano lesson days. Today he'd surprised them by arriving just as Oliver was mastering a particularly challenging piece. "Again?" Oliver demanded, his fingers poised over the keys. "I almost got it that time." Naomi glanced at Harry, who had settled into his usual spot by the window, his tie already loosened. He nodded, smiling. "Don't let me interrupt." The piece was a simple holiday tune that Oliver had begged to learn, wanting to surprise his grandmother when she visited for Thanksgiving next week. His determination had paid off. Each note rang clear and true, only faltering slightly at the bridge. "Perfect," Naomi praised when he finished. "Your grandmother will love it." "Can we try it as a duet?" Oliver asked, scooting over on the bench. "Like we did yesterday." Before Naomi could respond, Harry spoke from his corner. "Actually, could I try?" Both Naomi and Oliver turned to stare at him. Since that first impromptu lesson during his business trip, Harry hadn't touched the piano again. "Really?" Oliver's face lit up. "You want to play with us?" Harry stood, straightening his shoulders as if preparing for battle. "If Miss Naomi doesn't mind teaching 2 students today." Naomi felt her heart flutter at the vulnerability in his voice. "I'd love to." The bench was really only meant for 2, but they made it work. Oliver in the middle, Naomi and Harry on either side. The proximity was dizzying. Naomi could smell Harry's subtle aftershave, feel the warmth of him just inches away. "Remember what we practiced?" she asked Oliver, who nodded enthusiastically. "You play the bottom notes, Dad plays the middle, and I play the top part." He demonstrated by picking out his melody line. "Like a sandwich," Harry laughed, the sound rich and warm. "A musical sandwich." "The best kind," Naomi agreed, then gently positioned Harry's hands on the keys. "Just like we practiced before. Feel the rhythm. Don't think too hard about the notes." They began slowly, Oliver leading with his clear melody line. Naomi added the bass notes, creating a foundation for the others to build upon. Harry hesitated at first, then found his way into the middle harmony, his part simple but essential. The first attempt was rough, timing off, notes missed, harmonies tangled, but Oliver's determination was infectious, and soon they found their rhythm. By the 5th try, something magical happened. The music flowed between them like a conversation, each part supporting the others, creating something larger than themselves. "We did it!" Oliver bounced on the bench when they finished. "We made music together." His excitement was cut short by a loud rumble from his stomach. Harry checked his watch, eyebrows rising. "No wonder. It's past dinner time. How about pizza?" "Can Miss Naomi stay?" Oliver asked immediately. "Please, we can have a pizza party and play more music and—" "Oliver," Harry interrupted gently, but Naomi touched his arm. "I'd love to stay," she said softly. "If you're sure." The look Harry gave her made her breath catch. "I'm sure." While Harry called for pizza, Oliver insisted on showing Naomi his latest treasure collection, now organized by both color and musical potential. "This one sounds like a tiny bell," he demonstrated, tapping a small crystal. "And this one makes a nice low sound, like the bass notes you play." Naomi watched him categorize his findings with such serious concentration, seeing so much of his father in his methodical approach. "You know what these remind me of?" she asked. "What?" "Wind chimes. We could make some, if you'd like." Oliver's eyes widened. "Really? Our own musical decorations? I used to make them with my grandmother," Naomi explained. "Yeah, we'd use all sorts of things. Bells, crystals, even old keys. Each one had its own special song." "Can we make one for Dad for Christmas?" Oliver whispered, glancing toward the kitchen where Harry was still on the phone. "A special musical present." Naomi felt her heart warm at his thoughtfulness. "That's a wonderful idea." "What's a wonderful idea?" Harry asked, returning from the kitchen. "Secret Christmas plans," Oliver declared. "No fathers allowed." Harry raised his hands in surrender, but his eyes met Naomi's with amused curiosity. "Fair enough. Pizza will be here in 20 minutes. Just enough time for another practice session?" They returned to the piano, and this time the music came easier, as if their earlier success had opened something between them. Naomi found herself hyper-aware of every movement, every breath, every moment. Harry's arm brushed against hers as they played. When the doorbell rang announcing dinner, Oliver ran to get plates while Harry paid for the pizza. In the kitchen, Naomi began gathering napkins and drinks, moving through the space with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. "You do, you know," Harry said quietly behind her. "Do what?" "Belong here." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "I see the way you move through the house, the way you know where everything is, the way you've made it more of a home than it's been in years." Naomi turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Harry! Dad! The pizza's getting cold!" Oliver's voice broke the moment, but something had shifted between them, something electric and inevitable. They ate in the living room, Oliver insisting on what he called a piano picnic. He spread a blanket on the floor near the instrument, arranging everything just so. The scene was so domestic, so perfect, that Naomi felt her chest tighten with emotion. "Miss Naomi?" Oliver asked between bites. "Will you help me practice again tomorrow? I want it to be perfect for Grammy." "Of course," she smiled. "But remember what we said about perfect, that it doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful," Oliver recited. "Like how Dad sometimes plays the wrong notes, but it still sounds nice because he's trying his best." Harry nearly choked on his pizza. "Thanks for that, buddy." "Well, it's true," Oliver defended. "Miss Naomi says mistakes are just opportunities to learn something new. She's very wise," Harry said softly, his eyes finding Naomi's across the makeshift picnic. After dinner, Oliver convinced them to play one more time before bed. This final performance was their best yet, not because it was perfect, but because they had stopped trying to make it so. Instead, they simply played together, 3 hearts beating in time with the music they created. When Oliver finally began to droop, Harry carried him upstairs for bed. Naomi began cleaning up, folding the blanket and gathering plates, trying not to think about how natural it all felt, how much she didn't want to leave. "He's asking for you," Harry said when he returned. "Says his goodnight isn't complete without a song." Upstairs, Oliver was already half asleep, but he smiled when she appeared. "Can you sing the cloud song, the one from the thunderstorm?" Naomi sat on the edge of his bed and began to hum softly, the lullaby she'd created during their stormy night together. Harry leaned against the doorframe, watching them with an expression that made her heart race. When Oliver's breathing evened out into sleep, they tiptoed out, closing his door softly. In the hallway, Harry turned to her. "Stay," he said simply. Naomi felt her breath catch. "Harry, not. I mean," he ran a hand through his hair. "It's snowing pretty hard out there. You shouldn't drive in this. We have the guest room, and Oliver would love to have you here for breakfast. And He paused, gathering courage. "I would too." The house seemed to hold its breath around them, waiting for her answer. Through the window, snow fell softly, turning the world into something magical and new. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Dawn crept into the Callahan house with gentle fingers, painting the snow-covered world outside in shades of rose and gold. Naomi woke slowly in the guest room, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous evening flooded back. The impromptu piano concert, the pizza picnic, Harry asking her to stay. The house felt different in these early hours, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. She could hear movement downstairs, Harry's familiar footsteps, the quiet whir of the coffee machine, the domestic symphony of a household coming awake. Wrapping herself in the borrowed robe Harry had left out for her, Naomi made her way downstairs. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed for work but missing his usual tie, stirring something at the stove. "You're making pancakes," she said softly, causing him to turn. The look that crossed his face when he saw her, wearing his late mother's robe, hair still mussed from sleep, made her heart skip. "I thought," he cleared his throat, "I thought we could all have breakfast together, before real life intrudes." "Real life?" Harry set down his spatula, turning to face her fully. "Naomi, Dad, Miss Naomi!" Oliver's voice preceded him down the stairs. "It snowed more. Can we build a snow piano?" Harry blinked. "A snow? What? A piano?" Oliver bounced into the kitchen, still in his spaceship pajamas. "You know, like a snowman, but better. We can make the keys and everything." Naomi caught Harry's eye, saw her own amusement reflected there. "After breakfast," she said, "and after you're properly dressed for snow." They gathered around the kitchen island, a family in everything but name, eating Harry's slightly misshapen but perfectly flavored pancakes. Oliver chattered excitedly about his plans for the snow piano, while Harry and Naomi exchanged glances over their coffee cups, each touch of their eyes carrying the weight of unspoken words. "I should call the clinic," Harry said eventually, checking his phone. "With this much snow, some patients might need to reschedule." While he made his calls, Naomi helped Oliver bundle up for the snow. Boots, coat, 2 pairs of gloves, because snow artists need warm hands, Miss Naomi. Through the kitchen window, they could see Harry pacing as he talked, his free hand running through his hair in that familiar gesture of thought. "Dad looks nervous," Oliver observed, struggling with his zipper. Like before my piano recital." Naomi knelt to help him, trying to keep her voice steady. "What makes you say that? He keeps doing the hair thing, and he made pancakes. He only makes pancakes when he has something important to say." Oliver looked at her with those 2 wise eyes. "Is it because of the music we made together?" Before Naomi could respond, Harry returned. "Clinic's closed for the morning. Roads are too bad." He looked at them both, already bundled for outside adventure. Room for one more on the snow piano construction crew. They spent the next hour in the front yard, Oliver directing their efforts with the seriousness of a symphony conductor. The snow piano took shape slowly, a grand curve of packed snow for the body, carefully sculpted keys made from darker snow, mixed with a bit of soil, even a tiny bench carved from a block of ice. "It's perfect," Oliver declared, stepping back to admire their work. His cheeks were red with cold and excitement. "Now we just need..." "Need what, buddy?" "Music." He began to hum their practice piece, dancing around the snow piano with theatrical flourishes. "Come on, Dad, you be the middle notes." Harry laughed, joining his son's improvised performance. He held out his hand to Naomi. "Bass notes." She took it, letting him pull her into their snowy dance. They moved together around their frozen creation, humming and laughing, their breath making clouds in the winter air. When Oliver slipped, Harry caught him without missing a beat, swinging him up into an embrace that included Naomi too. For a moment, they stood there in the snow, 3 hearts beating together, surrounded by the kind of magic that only happens when love and music meet. Then Oliver sneezed, breaking the spell. Inside, Harry decided, hot chocolate time. In the kitchen, they moved around each other with practiced ease, Harry heating milk, Naomi finding mugs, Oliver carefully counting marshmallows to ensure equal distribution. The domesticity of it all made Naomi's heart ache with longing. "Miss Naomi," Oliver asked, marshmallow dust on his chin, "are you going to go home now that the snow's stopping?" The question hung in the air like a held note. Harry stilled by the stove, his back to them but his attention clearly focused on her answer. Naomi began, but Oliver wasn't finished. "Because I think you should stay. Not just today, but always." He said it with the simple certainty of a child stating an obvious truth. "The house likes it better when you're here, and Dad does too." He smiles more. "Oliver," Harry's voice was soft but strained. "That's not..." "But it's true," Oliver insisted. "And Miss Naomi likes being here too. I can tell because she plays different music when she's happy." and her happy music is always loudest here. Naomi felt tears prick at her eyes. Oliver, and I know you're not my mom, he continued, his voice getting smaller, but you make us whole again, like the piano. It was lonely and quiet, and then you came and helped it remember how to sing. You helped us all remember. Harry turned then, his eyes meeting Naomi's over their son's head. The look they shared held years of longing, of careful steps, of music slowly building to this moment. He's right, Harry said quietly. About all of it. Naomi felt her heart thundering in her chest. Harry, he moved toward her, slow but certain. The house is different when you're here. We're different, better, more ourselves. He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar nervous gesture that made her want to smooth it back into place. I've been trying to find the right words, the right moment. But leave it to Oliver to say it perfectly. The best music, Oliver added sagely, doesn't need words anyway. A laugh bubbled up through Naomi's tears. When did you get so wise? Grammy says I got it from Dad, but Dad says I got it from watching people. He looked between them. Who's right now? I'm watching you both look at each other like you look at the piano, like you're afraid to touch the keys but really want to play the song. Harry made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan. Out of the mouths of babes. I'm not a baby, Oliver protested. I'm a musician, and musicians know about harmony. He took their hands, joining them together like notes in a chord. See? Perfect pitch. The touch of Harry's hand in hers sent electricity up Naomi's arm. She looked up at him, saw everything she felt reflected in his eyes. Stay, he whispered, echoing his words from the night before, but meaning something entirely different now. Not just tonight, not just tomorrow. Stay and help us make music, build snow pianos, create harmony. He squeezed her hand gently. Stay and be part of our song. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, leaving the world pristine and new. Through the window, their snow piano stood guard over the yard, its keys catching the winter sunlight like promises waiting to be kept. Yes, Naomi breathed, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones like the final note of a perfect piece. Voice yes. Christmas Eve painted Winchester in shades of holiday magic, dusting the town with fresh snow that sparkled under street lamps like scattered stars. Inside the Callahan house, warmth and music filled every corner, transforming the once quiet spaces into a symphony of joy. Naomi stood at the kitchen counter, adding final touches to a plate of her now famous cinnamon cookies, while Oliver's voice drifted down from upstairs, where he was supposedly changing for the evening's celebrations. Instead of getting dressed, he appeared to be practicing his part of their planned performance. Snippets of Silent Night floated through the house, interspersed with his running commentary. Oliver, Harry called up the stairs. Your grandmother will be here in 20 minutes. I'm almost ready, came the reply. I'm just making sure the music is perfect. Naomi felt Harry's arms slip around her waist from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. He's been practicing that piece for weeks, he murmured. I don't think I've ever seen him so dedicated to anything. He wants it to be special, Naomi said, leaning back into his embrace. It's our first Christmas together, after all. The words hung in the air like delicate ornaments, precious and bright. In the month since the snow day that had changed everything, their lives had merged with the gentle inevitability of melody flowing into harmony. Naomi's apartment stood empty now, her belongings gradually finding their way home, because that's what the Callahan house had become, home. Speaking of special, Harry said, reaching into his pocket. I have something for you. I was going to wait until tomorrow, but he pressed a small box into her hands. Inside lay a delicate silver key on a chain that held tiny musical note charms. Harry, I know you already have a house key, he said quickly, but I wanted to give you one that wasn't about work or practicality, one that means something more. Naomi turned in his arms to face him, her heart full. It's perfect. Like you, he whispered, leaning down to kiss her softly. You kissing? Oliver's voice made them jump apart. He stood in the doorway, dressed in his Christmas best, his blonde hair actually combed for once. Save that for after the concert, Harry laughed, keeping one arm around Naomi's waist. All ready for Grammy's arrival? Almost. Oliver darted to the piano, arranging his sheet music with precise care. Miss Naomi, can we practice one more time, please? Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Oliver's eyes widened. "She's early." Harry went to let his mother in while Naomi helped Oliver calm his nerves. "Remember what we always say about music. It doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful," he recited, then added with a smile, "Like us." Naomi felt her heart swell. "Exactly like us." Grammy Callahan swept into the house in a flurry of hugs and exclamations over Oliver's growth. Harry's good looks, finally getting enough sleep, I see, and the wonderful smells coming from the kitchen. But when she saw the piano set up with 3 music stands and gleaming in the soft light, she fell silent. "Are we having music tonight?" she asked softly. Harry took his mother's coat, exchanging a glance with Naomi. "Oliver has been preparing something special. We all have." Grammy's eyes filled with tears as she looked between them. "All of you." Oliver took his grandmother's hand, leading her to the best seat in the room. "It's a family concert," he explained seriously, "because that's what we are now, a family that makes music together." The elderly woman's gaze found Naomi's, filled with gratitude and welcome. "Yes," she said softly. "Faz, yes you are." They took their places at the piano, Oliver in the middle as always, Naomi and Harry on either side. The arrangement of Silent Night was simple but lovely, adapted to showcase each of their abilities. Oliver's clear melody, Harry's steady harmonies, and Naomi's flowing accompaniment. As they began to play, Naomi felt the rightness of it all settle over her like a beloved blanket. This was what coming home meant. Not just to a place, but to people who saw you, who chose you, who helped you create something beautiful from all the scattered notes of life. The piece flowed perfectly, each note falling into place like snowflakes creating a perfect winter scene. When they finished, Grammy wiped tears from her eyes. That was how she used to play it," she whispered. "My daughter, Oliver's mother, but different too, warmer somehow. More like a lullaby," Oliver supplied. "Miss Naomi says that's because we put love in every note." "That you do," Grammy agreed, opening her arms for Oliver to run into. Over his head, she looked at Naomi and Harry. "All of you." After Grammy left that evening, laden with cookies and promises to return for Christmas dinner the next day, they sat together in the living room. The tree lights cast soft shadows on the walls, and the piano stood sentinel in its corner, no longer an artifact of the past, but a bridge to their future. Oliver, fighting sleep but unwilling to admit it, curled up between them on the couch. "Can we play something else? Just one more song?" "Tomorrow," Harry promised, smoothing his son's hair. "We have all the time in the world for more music. Because we're a family now," Oliver mumbled, his eyes drifting closed. "A proper one, with 3 parts in harmony." Naomi felt Harry's hand find hers over their sleeping child's head. The silver key around her neck caught the light, its musical charms tinkling softly with her movement. "He's right, you know," Harry said quietly, "about the harmony." Naomi looked at their intertwined fingers, at the peaceful face of the boy who had helped bring them together, at the piano that had started it all. "I know," she whispered. "I can hear it." Later, after they'd tucked Oliver into bed and returned downstairs, Harry pulled Naomi to the piano. Without words, they sat together on the bench, their shoulders touching, their hands finding their places on the keys. They played softly, improvising a melody that spoke of all the things their hearts had known before their minds caught up, of lonely houses learning to sing again, of children's wisdom showing the way, of love that grew in the spaces between notes until it filled every corner with its music. When the last notes faded away, Harry turned to her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? For teaching us how to make music again. For showing us that love doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful." He touched the key that hung around her neck. "For making this house a home." Naomi leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady against her. "Thank you for letting me be part of your song." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle like notes floating down from heaven. Inside, the house hummed with contentment, its rooms filled with the echoes of music and laughter and love. They had learned what Oliver seemed to know all along, that the best songs weren't just about the notes you played, but about the people you played them with. That family wasn't just about blood or names, but about the harmony you created together. That love, like music, was something you had to practice every day, letting it grow and change and become more beautiful with each passing measure. And as they sat there in the quiet of Christmas Eve, their hearts beating in time with the gentle tick of the clock and the soft fall of snow. They knew that this was just the beginning of their song, a melody that would grow and change with them, but would always be played together. 1 year later, the late autumn sun streamed through the windows of the Callahan house, catching dust motes that danced like musical notes in the air. In the living room, the piano held pride of place, its polished surface adorned with framed photographs that told the story of a family brought together by music and love. There was Oliver at his first proper recital, beaming with pride as he took his bow. Harry and Naomi on their wedding day 6 months ago, dancing to a piece Oliver had helped compose for the occasion. The three of them at the piano, caught in a moment of laughter during one of their family concerts that had become a neighborhood tradition. Now, on this quiet Sunday afternoon, new music filled the house. Oliver, 7½, the half is very important, Miss Nomi, sat at the piano beside a small girl from his class, patiently showing her how to position her fingers on the keys. "See?" he demonstrated, his voice carrying the same gentle patience Naomi had shown him all those months ago. "It's like making friends with each note. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to listen." From the kitchen doorway, Naomi watched them, one hand resting on her growing belly where their newest family member was already developing a taste for music, moving in time with every melody played in the house. Harry's arms slipped around her waist, his hands joining hers over their future musician. "He's quite the teacher," he murmured in her ear. "Like father, like son," she replied, leaning back against him. "You've both learned to let the music flow instead of chasing perfection." In the living room, Oliver's student hit a wrong note and giggled. "That's okay," they heard him say. "Sometimes the wrong notes lead us to the right song. That's how my family found each other." Harry's arms tightened around Naomi as they listened to their son share his wisdom. "He never forgets, does he?" "No," she whispered, "and neither do I." The piano music continued, slightly hesitant, but full of joy, floating through their home like a benediction. Outside, leaves danced on the autumn breeze, nature's accompaniment to the symphony of their lives, lives that had found their perfect harmony in the space between the notes, in the quiet moments between songs, in the love that turned a house into a home, and 3 separate melodies into one beautiful, endless piece of music. The end. Based on this sweet story of love, family, and music, I want to ask you a profound question. Just as Naomi brought music back into the Callahans' lives, what was the moment when someone special came into your life and changed everything, turning silence into melody? That person who, like perfect notes in a song, filled in the gaps and made your heart sing again. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.